When I see that video, it just takes me back to those moments because that was basically the last few hours that I ever saw my daughter Krista alive. And so I'm just going to tell kind of the story about that night and what it was like. And so Krista was placed on hospice care and she lived for about 2 weeks after that. And no one really knew what was going to happen with her because she was so severely disabled from like her original injury of being shaken that she could never do like any voluntary movements, and no one really knew, like, the shaking and coding afterwards killed a lot of her brain, and so no one really knew how long that brain would sustain her body and her life. But she lived for about 3 years after being shaken, up to the point of that video, which was her last night here on earth. And so that night, basically, we kind of knew what was happening, but also kind of didn't, because, she had hospice care. So they would come to our home and they would give their opinions and stuff, like, oh, we think it might be soon. But throughout that 2 weeks of hospice care, they were just still like, we just don't know. She could live a few months. We have no clue. So it's kind of agonizing leading up to that moment because I didn't want to leave the house. I was like, what if I'm gone and she passes away when I'm gone? All of those thoughts and emotions and feelings. But that day, it's just like I knew but didn't know. And so the night before this video, I had spent time in her bedroom with her, telling her that it was okay for her to go, that she didn't have to hold on, just talking with her, saying things that I had never said before. And just letting her know that it was going to be okay, and that, I explained to her, like, someone, God's going to come and you're going to see God's face and everything's going to be okay and you're going to feel comfort and, you're not going to be in pain. And so just telling her all of those things. So then when this video was taken, she had been, like, her oxygen, her O2 was going down. Her respirations were further, like, in between respirations. And so we knew what was happening at this point of, like, the video. And, her skin was turning purple and stuff like that from the lack of oxygen. And so when I look back now, and the reason why I recorded those videos was because I wanted those memories. Like, I know enough to know about my brain that when I'm going through a traumatic situation, because I've been through several of those in my life, that my brain kind of just shuts down and doesn't want to, like, remember those moments. And so to protect myself, I think that the way my brain works is like trauma brain, which is where it shuts down and is like, don't remember this. And so I have a hard time remembering. So I film a lot of things so that I can look back if I want and remember those things. And also with her situation, so I can share the realities of shaken baby syndrome, because you just don't realize what one moment of weakness can cause an entire person's life to end up like. So I look back and just think, I cannot believe that happened. Like, I lived through it. It was very real, but it's still so hard to think now that this year will be 4 years at the end of the year, and it's so hard to think that even happened, because, like, I miss her every day, and there's not a day that has gone by in 4 years that I haven't thought of her in one way or another. And so when I see that, it's just like, I just cannot believe that was me in that video. It's me in the video, and it's so hard to believe that was me. And it's so hard to believe that was my own daughter. And so I'm not in denial of the situation. I've had to work through lots of different emotions and stuff. But it is just a weird feeling. But I am glad I have the videos, because I can look back whenever I want, which is not very often, but I do share it to, just show the reality of what a special needs parent can go through, of what it's like to lose a child, all of those things, shaken baby syndrome specifically. And so I hope that by sharing the videos, it does make people think more about it, and if anything, can save another baby's life, save another baby from having to pass away because of an injury, because of one moment of weakness. And so if that happens, if there's one child out there that doesn't have to die because of the lack of knowledge, the lack of just understanding of how just picking up a baby and shaking the baby, like, okay, that seems like common sense, like, duh, don't do that. But, you know, it happens mostly in young families. So think about I was 22 years old, I believe, when this happened to my daughter. And, I didn't do it. My ex-husband, her biological father, is the one who shook her. And I would have never done that. But maybe if he had known more about it, maybe, if he had seen a video like that, that he would have thought more in that moment, and that video would have came to mind, and he'd be like, I can't do this. I don't know. But if you think about the statistics of shaken baby syndrome happening in younger younger parents, then you think about the people who, they just graduated high school. And if you think about, I don't want to necessarily say like maturity level, because some of, seniors and stuff, they are pretty mature. But if you think of what they're thinking about, it's usually not going to be something like that. And so if we can warn them that this does happen, it does exist. If someone could go back and warn me in that moment when I was 19, I got married at 19 years old and had my first child at 20 years old. This was my second child that was shaken, but my first child, she didn't have anything happen to her. But if I would have known more about it, maybe I could have somehow prevented it, even though she was alone with him and I wasn't around to stop anything. But maybe, there is someone out there who needs to see this, page, who, if you just have someone who is a senior who just graduated, it would be good to show them this page so that they could just be aware, because it's not something that I don't think they teach in school. At least they didn't teach at my school. And so if you don't know, you just simply don't know these things. And so by, seeing a page like this, it ends up putting it in front of you. And so if you do know, like, a senior in high school, someone who just graduated, someone who's going to be a first-time parent soon, just share this with them. Because I don't want this to happen to anyone else. This was the worst thing that has ever happened to me. There's nothing that could ever happen to me that would be worse than a child being put in that situation and then having to live for 3 years. And I had to live looking at her, dealing with all that stuff every day for 3 years, and then her passing away. And losing a child is absolutely the worst thing that I've ever been through and ever will go through. So if I can prevent that, if I can share my story and prevent that, then that's what I'm going to do. So please feel free to share anything that I share on here, and just to let people know that this does happen.